Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another snowy Tuesday from Wonderland in Vermont. The wind is, I don't know, those of you who heat with wood stoves know the sound of the, when the fire's moving through the stove. It's so windy up here today that I can't tell if the house is blowing down, the stove is cranking up. So if you suddenly get whiteout conditions from me here, that'll mean, maybe that I got blown away, or maybe I'll just be blown away by the news. So you're Clarence Thomas. You're 75 years old. You can sit for the rest of your natural life as a member of the United States Supreme Court, lobbing hand grenades into the collective consciousness of everybody in your opinions. Used to be dissents, now you sometimes marshal majority opinions, and you're a controversial person. People don't like you. They don't like who you're hanging out with. And in from the wings comes some wise ass with a couple bucks, and he says, you know what? I think you're destroying the United States Supreme Court. You can retire today and I'll pay you $1 million a year, presumably for the rest of your life. If I were Clarence, much though I think John Oliver is sort of a feckless little twerp with a pipe cleaner where he should have a penis, I might just take him up on that $1 million. It's unseemly, but I can't think that it breaks a law. I mean, I don't, and I'm unaware, as a matter of history, whether anyone has ever accepted such an offer or made one and have it accepted. I mean, Mike, what's your take on this? Should Clarence say I'm done?
My take is this is a perfect contracts exam question for finals all over the country.
Oh, what a great, yeah. So let's break that down. What is a contract? Is just a promise that the law will enforce.
Yeah, so a contract has three basic elements, right? You have an unambiguous offer, you have an unambiguous acceptance by certain means, and you have consideration that binds the two together. And consideration is typically in the law what people are arguing over in terms of enforceability of a contract. And in this circumstance, the consideration here is the main question. Right. So we have an unambiguous offer. John Oliver has offered Clarence Thomas $1 million every year for the rest of his life or John Oliver's natural life, whichever occurs first.
Well, is there a suicide? I mean, John Oliver is such a miserable, self-righteous little prick. He could kill himself tomorrow and say, nah. I'd want an annuity securing that thing. But anyhow, back to the contract.
We're attorneys, so we're going to ruin this joke really quickly, right? But
sorry,
that's the basic. Well, no, it's great. That's great. So this is what it's built on top of. But the ultimate question here is this adequate consideration? In other words, is this a bargain for exchange that is sufficient to bind both parties to the agreement? In other words, is John Oliver getting enough with Justice Thomas's resignation to secure his promise to pay him $1 million per year for the rest of either of their natural lives?
Well, wouldn't Oliver's own words prove that he is? Because Oliver is so concerned about the Supreme Court and its integrity and the role it plays in American life, and Clarence Thomas's corrupt and baleful influence.
Here's the game. What must occur first? In that contract, who has to perform first?
Wouldn't it be mutual? Well, I guess the offer has been made. It would be accepted by Thomas saying, I accept, I resign, effective immediately. Here's my check. Now, if he resigns and Oliver doesn't pay, then he's got to sue by saying that he resigned in reliance on that. And now, in my view, Mike, I'm sorry.
What's the remedy?
Performance, the money. Show me the money.
Is he made whole by money? Or is he made whole by having his seat back on the Supreme Court? And that's
not something within the control of the parties. I would say that his active. No, I would say that once you resign, you resign. You can't unresign. And so it would be an unseemly game of chicken. But let's contrast this with a contract the law would never enforce. And this contract sort of feels similar to it, candidly. I offer you $10,000 to kill one of my rivals. And you kill the rival. And you then come up to me saying, I've performed, give me the cash. And I'm like, are you out of your freaking mind? I'm not paying you. You killed somebody. You've relied on my on my offer. You've performed. There's the body. I went to the funeral. I wept those crocodile tears. You want the cash. The law will say that contract is against public policy. What's more, it involved an act that's malum in se, that is evil in and of itself, killing someone. And thus the moral dimension and the legal dimension intersect, at least in this easy case of homicide. Doesn't this approach something like a bribe to a public official? And in this case, it does, but I don't think it quite crosses the line, because he's asking the official to resign and no longer perform his duties. He's not asking for the performance of a particular promise. Vote yes on this, vote no on that. If Thomas had a sense of humor, he'd take him up on it, because I mean, at some point you got to decide. I've had enough of the puzzle palace up here. I want to get in my Winnebago and pack Ginny along and go for that infinite road trip that some people call retirement. So suppose Thomas does that and Oliver doesn't perform. What then?
Well, look, I don't think it's a binding or an enforceable contract. I think the issue is that John Oliver has made, is not getting sufficient consideration. In other words, consideration or Thomas's performance is not unique into the offeror sufficient to say this is a legally binding and valid contract. And I think that
Really?
and I think that that's the game, right? For sure.
Wait, let me challenge that. Let me challenge that for a moment. Thomas, all he's got to do is stay alive, and he can write flame-throwing opinions for the next 10, 15, 20 years, depending on how long his genes hold out. And he's giving that up. Isn't that enough?
What is it about his performance of his resignation of the office of Justice of the Supreme Court that is unique to the offeror that is John Oliver?
Oliver finds his role repugnant in American life. Just why? I mean, is Oliver even an American citizen? Do we even give a shit? But he finds his role repugnant, and he'll sleep better at night knowing that Thomas isn't on the court.
Here's the real issue. This is really why we're even talking about this, and it's because HBO has decided that they're not going to release clips of John Oliver tonight every Monday morning, and they're trying to get people to sign up. Right.
So gosh, well, we fell right into that trap.
I had this ready, right? But again, this is a great fact pattern for the doctrinal contracts course in law school. I think that it tests a lot of boundaries here in terms of ascertained offeror, offeree, right? The uniqueness of the performance that each owes, and the adequateness of the consideration underlying that. And then it also tests remedies, right? Again, remedies under contract law are designed to make an aggrieved party made whole again. But for the offer inducing the performance from John Oliver, would Thomas have resigned? And is he made whole by the simple payment of money damages from Oliver?
Yeah.
And I would submit to you that the answer is no.
Well, stay tuned. It's likely to be moot, and it's probably, as you point out and suggest, just a publicity stunt to get us to talk about John Oliver. It worked, Johnny. Where's my million? Hey, John, I'll retire from the practice of law. All you've got to do is pay me $500,000 a year. I'll at half the bargain of Clarence Thomas.
Here's a question. Hans over on Rumble asks, did Oliver offer money to own a black man?
Yo, come on over here, boy. I want you to light my cigar.
And I think it's Jackson Barrett is saying that Clarence has maybe 7 years left. Yeah, but that's seven good years of him on the bench. I think he's probably one of the most, if not the most, elite thinker on the court. That's just my personal opinion, and I think that he drives the political left absolutely bonkers because he is the closest thing to a Scalia that we have left on the court.
That could be. Hey, so let's pivot here. Julian from down under. Good day. I thank you for the good morning. He asked the following question: the Fanny situation, or excuse me, the Fawny situation. I mean, I still can't say Fawny when I think of Fanny because I've never seen a deer with a fat hindquarters. But Fawny. The Fawny situation makes me wonder if elected DAs can ever really deliver balanced justice, assuming that's the idea. Are there any alternative methods of appointing DAs under consideration? Naive question. It's not a naive question, Julian. Some states do not elect district attorneys. In my home state of Connecticut, for example, we do not have elected prosecutors. There is something called the Criminal Justice Commission, which is appointed by the lawmakers and consists of judges, members of the public, and so forth. If you want to become a prosecutor, you make an application to the Criminal Justice Commission, and you are either recommended or not. Once a person is recommended, those names go to the governor, and the governor can appoint. A prosecutor in Connecticut will serve for an 8-year term and then is subject to renewal hearings where his or her performance can be reviewed by the commission and so forth. So, there are alternatives. I think electing judges, I think electing prosecutors is a horrible idea. I don't want people making decisions about my or my client's liberty based on the latest public opinion poll. Whether Fawny or Fanny would pass muster in Connecticut is an open question. She's certainly ambitious. She has an impressive track record, as the book we discussed yesterday reflected. But I think elected prosecutors are a bad idea.
I thought sometimes dies a little bit when you give weird compliments like that. But here's my take on the question. I think that the question that Julian asked, and I'll put it back on the screen here, it does beg one key inquiry, and that is, we are asking the question. You're suspicious, or you're cynical about, I guess the discretion that someone in her position wields, and how we would have gotten to this position as a society focused on the Fulton County District Attorney and its treatment of one Donald Trump and his co-defendants in a racketeering case, and the conflicts that existed and should have been known and ameliorated prior to this becoming public facing. What that presupposes is, I think, some level of moral certitude, right? Some sort of honor code, and some semblance of what I think in our mind's eye we talk about when we say that there is intellectual and spiritual pluralism in the United States. There is some sort of unifying themes or motifs of truth and honor. And I do believe that we are in a situation, Julian, that begs a little more scrutiny than simply, the system that we have in place. The system requires a unification of principles between civilized people and some level of expectation and dignity among one another.
It's true.
If we're lacking that to a certain inflection point, what we get is a complete destruction of that system, because there is nothing truly that binds us together any more than our commitment to the principles of law and justice that we've established for ourselves. So
the silent partner in every legal transaction is integrity. You assume that parties are dealing in good faith and that they share an underlying core of values such that not every term and condition has to be spelled out. Contracts are sometimes supplemented with what's called an implied warranty of fair dealing. The parties are presumed to be operating in good conscience and in good faith. When they're not, that's a problem, and everything dissolves. And I think our world around us is decaying as we speak. Hey, we promised yesterday, I didn't mean to step on the discussion, Mike, but I did a pretty good job of it. Did you want to say more on that, or should we pivot?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay. Good. Yesterday, we promised to talk a little bit about immigration, and I realized we sometimes make promises and forget about them. In that way, we are fickle suitors, and you are our suitees. But in any case, I'll pay Fanny. Julian Toll will pay Fanny $1 million to drop the case. Julian, pay me $100,000, and I'll call her and ask her to do it. In any case, good faith is gone, Jackson Barrett says. Maybe it is. But here's what I think makes the immigration debate more interesting than it has been in recent eras in American history. And I'm going to call it the hyphenation problem. We talked a little bit about the xenophobia and the history of xenophobia in the United States. I reviewed an interesting book for you all about it not long ago. And what the author found, I think it was Miss Lee, is that xenophobia is a constant in American life from the time settlers first arrived through German immigration during the colonial period. The Scotch and then the Japanese, and then the Chinese, and then Southern Europeans, and now Muslims. We've all struggled with the presence of strangers in our life. Dawn McNeil points out that the ethnicity has been an important cohesive factor binding groups together. I buy all that. But I think that what makes the current climate in the United States so toxic to the immigration discussion is we've lost the ability that people are coming here to be blank Americans, this Italian Americans, Muslim Americans, this Americans, that Americans. It used to be that people came, and the metaphor of the melting pot was what united us in our discussions of immigration. People came here for the sake of a better life, and they committed to adopting new norms, not shedding their old identities, but acquiring a new one. And thus they would bring an Italian American perspective to the table. We've lost the ability to identify anything that is discreetly and identifiably American, and that when people come here now, we've reversed the hyphenation issue. They're Muslim Americans. They're not, they're not American Muslims. They're Muslim Americans. And what we need to do is we need to accommodate each group, because each group is precious. Each identity is an island that we all have to dock our ships to and travel and appreciate and respect, lest we do what? Disrespect someone. And the result is a pluralism without a center. What I will refer to, thanks to Yascha Mounk in his fascinating new book, which I'm about to talk for you, The Identity Trap. I've never read anything by Mounk. He's written several. I began this book last night, and he asks a serious question. What's happened in our grand intellectual culture, and what's happening in the world around us, such that we no longer have an adoption of universal norms that all are to aspire to, but instead we worship affinity groups? And he begins the book with a discussion of children in elite schools. We have to make sure that white children have a white group to go to so that they can be lectured about their common white privilege. And we need to make sure that African American children have African American affinity groups. And everybody has to identify as a member of their group so that they can effectively make claims or relinquish claims to places in the public space. Mounk asks whether a society can cohere on that basis, and I think the answer is no. I'll report more on the book as I plow through it. I only made the first 25 pages last night, but it's a serious work by a serious scholar that seeks to locate in our intellectual history the current melees that we have. The Identity Trap by Yascha Mounk. Take a look at it. So, I thought I'd have more on that. I don't. Hey, what, Mike? Are we going to get truckers? Are we going to get truckers rallying behind this? I think Chicago's Sam is a truck driver, and he took to Twitter last night or the day before, and he's so outraged by Judge Engoron's decision, fining Donald Trump, that he's encouraging truckers to stop delivering to New York City. I saw that tweet, and my mind immediately went to clips of farmers in the Netherlands and in France reacting against the desire to close farms and descending en masse on capitals and whatnot, and manure spreaders spreading manure on Capitol buildings. I thought of the Ottawa trucker convoy in reaction to COVID. I don't really see this form of populism succeeding as to New York. Do you really see tens of or hundreds, if not thousands, of truckers refusing to deliver to New York City?
I don't know. One thing I know very little about is the logistics capacity of Manhattan, and what the inflows and outflows day to day. I imagine it's something overwhelming and substantial, just considering the population density and the demands there. But I do think that more broadly, I'm cynical as well. I don't know that, or at least I don't know how confident I'd be that this is going to succeed to any real measure. The guy's named Chicago Ray. I think
Chicago Ray. Okay, sorry about that.
He's taken the video down since then, and I'm not sure how big this campaign ultimately really is. I don't know how much has truly materialized. But my issue is what you talked about with the Canadian truck protest and the Canadian government's Trudeau's crackdown, and the relentless aggressive pursuit of not only the truck drivers that were present, but their families, their bank accounts, their businesses, their employers, etc. I think that this had a dramatic chilling effect because of how visible that whole saga was. And even if there were some legitimate impetus or some willingness on the part of truck drivers as a collective to create some sort of de facto embargo of Manhattan, I'm not confident that right now the temperature is hot enough in the wake of this sort of civil judgment against Trump. It's my position that most people believe that to be a sham judgment and that it'll be set aside in due course, that it was nothing more. And to that end, there's not really a whole lot of reason to risk life and limb to embargo the city of Manhattan. And, there's probably plenty of truck drivers that would be willing to take the surge rates offered if there were any legitimate reduction in capacity for a temporary amount of time, right? So I'm not sure how coordinated and organized that, the truck driver effort would be. But I think, more broadly, I don't know that it's as urgent as would be necessary. This is not the same as a COVID crackdown, right?
I'll tell you, though, the thing that chills me in what you said is the chilling effect of government crackdowns on marginal speech, in protesting speech. And here's an example. Trudeau and company cracked down on convoys, and now people are afraid to come forward. It reminds me in the United States of the savage reaction of Merrick Garland and his chuckleheads in the Justice Department still unloading on January 6th defendants. I mean, we talked briefly the other day about, 5 J6 defendants thus far have committed suicide awaiting trial. There will likely be more, as there will be more defendants as we roll into the 2024 election season. One of the things that I particularly find promising about Munk's book, The Identity Trap, is he says, there's something wrong with identitarianism, and there's something wrong with the populist reaction to it. These folks both deserve one another, and they're playing in the same foul pool, and he promises a way out of that pool. Again, I hope he can deliver. I certainly believe we're trying to forge a middle ground. I think our instincts, my instincts at least, are to favor the populist because they seek significance in their own community in the face of those who would seek to deny them their right for autonomy and independence. But there's a limit to everything, including apparently Julian Assange's ability to remain in England. I guess the final hearings on his efforts to avoid extradition to the United States are going to take place. Is it in London? It's certainly in England this week.
Yep. Yes, in London.
So it's been a long saga for Assange. It was in
right?
Yeah, 2010, WikiLeaks revealed to the world the so-called murder tapes, drone footage of an American destructive device flying in Afghanistan, killing people, including civilians and journalists, and it outraged the world. And soon WikiLeaks was soliciting material from confidential United States sources and broadcasting to the world. So the question is, was Assange simply an enterprising journalist? Was he engaged in conspiracy to violate the Espionage Act? The United States government has indicted him or charged him with violating the Espionage Act, and he sought refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, I think for some 7 years. Yep. He was ultimately extricated and then tossed apparently into a British prison. He's now in a maximum security prison, and I don't know why that's where he has to be held pending extradition. That seems unduly harsh. Supporters of his say that extraditing him places him at grave physical and mental health risk, and that he is a risk of suicide. I don't know quite what to make of that. I suspect that Britain will extradite him. The law of extradition typically is that in order for a host state to get a person returned to the requesting state, both parties have to be obligated under a treaty that sets bilateral expectations and defines the conduct, or in the alternative, the conduct resulting in extradition, or in the alternative, that both parties have to be, or both jurisdictions have to regard the same conduct as a crime. And given Anglo-American security cooperation, I have to believe that this will satisfy the government of Great Britain, and Assange will come back for trial. I think it'll be an interesting trial. Whether he'll have an adequate defense on First Amendment grounds, that he was simply trying to shed light on the truth, and that he encouraged others to provide information but didn't quite cross the line as a co-conspirator. That's a question of law and fact that'll have to be sorted out at trial. It won't be sorted out at motion practice. The notion that he can't be extradited because he might commit suicide, that sort of sounds to me like a middle grade range of pouting. You say to your child at dinner, "Now clean your plate." "I'm not going to eat those peas. I'll kill myself before I eat those peas." just eat the damn peas and, die later. That would be my reaction as a parent. And I think with Assange, while my heart is in his camp, I also, and while I believe that the federal government does in fact classify far too much information, I do believe that it has a right to declare some things as secret and in the national interest. And I'm of two minds. I guess I'm frankly ambivalent about the prosecution of Julian Assange. In general, I'd prefer that he be acquitted because as a citizen, what he did is he gave me information about what my government is doing. And that always seems like a good thing. On the other hand, I'm not sure that every kid needs to know what mom and dad are doing 24/7 in the bedroom. And there are state secrets that are worth keeping. So I don't know enough, candidly. But I think that it's expected. There are 2 days of hearings expected. If he fails in this round of hearings, he'll probably be extradited to the United States fairly quickly. If he succeeds in this round of hearings, I gather there'll be more hearings later, and the purposes of delay will be accomplished. But at this point, 15, 14 years after the fact, it's time to bring this drama to a conclusion, one way or the other. Julian Toll says he belongs back home, down under, and that may be. That may be.
Well, man, yeah, I think it's tough. It's tough to be anything but ambivalent about the Assange case. Again, it originates to 2010. That's been some 13, 14 years ago, and the world has changed radically in the last decade, and some change technologically. It's changed our communication pathways, and the way that we organize ourselves have changed. Banking has changed, and even the nature of what state secrets are and how they're held, and even the verification and validation of state secrets as being true. That's all changed as well. There's been a huge shift in the consciousness of the average American, I think, and the average individual in the West. I think what this draws me to is Tucker Carlson's recent interview with Mike Benz. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to.
I didn't see it, no, but
it's interesting to me because it appears as though Assange was perhaps missing the forest for the trees with WikiLeaks. If what Mike Benz is saying in the interview with Tucker is that social media was always a tool designed primarily for the upending of foreign governments, right? And now it has been turned inward on us. And if there's anything that Assange could have done is perhaps sit a little while and perhaps try and figure out what such a massive data dump would ultimately mean for the future of the security apparatus that is the West right now. So it's tough. I don't know what changed about the world in the wake of this. It's just too macroscopic for me to really know. I do know that personally, it feels as though Assange has been lumped in with Snowden and the like, even though they are two entirely different cases factually, and then in terms of security, right? And to that end, I think that perhaps some of this apathy is attributable to that sort of malaise that has descended upon this conversation in general, because no one really thinks that there is any justice. The process is the punishment when it comes to Assange. And if he is in maximum security, which he is, after having spent 7 years in an Ecuadorian embassy in London, and his wife is saying that if he loses this appeal, that he, quote unquote, will die, I think that perhaps the state has gotten what it ultimately wished for.
Well, maybe Dizzy Lizzy will come to the rescue, and everything will will become bright, sunshine, transparent, and oh so constitutional. There's rumbling online that Liz Cheney is contemplating throwing her bonnet into the ring. Liz Cheney was, former congressman of Wyoming, whose daddy, who loved her and is proud of her, she told us umpteen times in her new book, Oath and Honor, left Congress, was voted out of Congress. She was a Republican hawk on the J6 committee, and thinks that Donald Trump should be tarred, feathered, and driven out of the Republic. Having said that, and I was prepared to like Liz, candidly. I'll be honest.
You were. It wasn't that long ago.
No, well, I mean, appearances were deceiving. I mean, I liked that she was an independent. I wanted to see a full and fair inquiry into January 6th. She became a partisan hack and a nut job, in my view. And now her book, Oath and Honor, confirmed that impression. She apparently has legal training, and she talks in this book umpteen times about loving the Constitution. But that's sort of like loving Frosted Flakes. What do you love about Frosted Flakes? Well, they're sweet. Well, they're crunchy. What do you love about the Constitution, Liz? I just love the Constitution. She strikes me as somewhat someone on the constitutional autism spectrum. She thinks if she repeats the word long enough and often enough, somebody's going to elect her as president, because after all, she's her daddy's daughter, and my daddy's proud of me. Liz, give it a break. Give it a rest. If Liz Cheney decides to run for politics, then I think Mike is going to run for president of world government. She's got no electability. She's a self-righteous windbag who writes with the fluency of a middle grade honors student, but has no subtlety. And her hawkish behavior on the J6 committee raises questions about whether she's fit to govern and serve all Americans. In fact, when I saw this story about Liz, I wondered whether the committee's encryption and destruction of a terabyte or so of data that was collected by the J6 committee before the House changed its hands would come back to haunt her. What notes of Liz's were buried in the now inaccessible documents? I also read the other day in the book on Fani Willis that the J6 committee was cooperating with Georgia prosecutors, while Georgia prosecutors had an open grand jury as to Trump and company. But who was it that wanted to make sure that no documents changed hands, that documents didn't fall into the defense's hands? Liz Cheney. So rather than sharing documents, Liz and Benny Thompson, chairman of the committee, insisted that Georgia prosecutors come for verbal briefings so that they'd have plausible deniability, and so that there'd be no Brady obligations to pass stuff along to the defense. If you want more of Merrick Garland, if you want more of Merrick Garland, if you want more of Merrick Garland and what the Justice Department has brought us in the last 4 years, vote for Liz Cheney. She's an attack dog for something. It's not something I recognize as.
And most importantly, Norm, most disqualifying, of course. Dawn says Liz is chubby.
Is she?
I don't know. I
mean, she's not. She doesn't have Fawny's girth. Dawn, but Dawn is really tweaking me for being a misogynistic pig who evaluates women in part on their appearance. Guilty as charged, Dawn. It's called genetics, and no one ever escapes the mating game. And I have news for you.
You're a girther.
What's that? I'm a girther. Yeah. I'm a girther. That's right. If you're too weighty, if you're too weighty for office, then you should be joining Dawn for a round of at Dawn pickleball. Merrick Garlic. Yes, a new name for a pizza chain. That's where they practice pedophilia, in the basement at Merrick Garlic's place. Cloven hooves aren't permitted.
I love this comment from Janet. Thank you, Janet. You always offer something very thought-provoking. Liz is a prime example of all the people who have no internal dialogue about right and wrong. They seem to be clustered in D.C. No disagreeing with either one of those sentences.
And does that make them cluster schmucks engaged in a cluster bleep?
Cloistered. They're cloistered and clustered.
Well, I'm going to take my hurt feelings out for a walk today. I'll be thinking of Dawn McNeil as I plow through the snow in my snowshoes, thinking, I hope I don't become a wide bottom as well, because then Dawn wouldn't love me anymore.
Before we get out of here, one thing to offer on the Ben's interview with Tucker. Freedom Lover and Jackson Barrett over on Rumble tell me that Mike Benz's interview with Jelaziak, am I pronouncing that correctly, with the Epoch Times or the Epoch Times, is a much better interview than his with Tucker. It's 2 parts and more in depth. So I will make sure to follow up on that. But either way, Norm, either one of those interviews, I think, is fit for your consumption as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, anything about the surveillance state is interesting. I sort of recoiled when I heard that there was a claim that social media was designed to accomplish X, Y, and Z. I think social media was just something that technology created, and now it's bent and put to differing uses. I don't think that the deep state created it to control us. I think they're now using it in an effort to do so. But I think it was benign in origin, just like cryptocurrencies were. It was a desire to be free. You know, the cyberpunks thought information wanted to be free and currency should be too. But the problem is that collective life living together creates imperatives that are never escapable. Government is as old as humankind, and how it works and why it works remains a mystery for us to solve each generation.
I will always love you, Dolly Parton.
Oh, stand by your man. Dawn, are you saying that you got watermelons where you should have muscles? Hi, folks, this is Dolly Parton. You know, Dolly Parton, you know, she has an industrial strength push-up bra. You know, I'm told that it took civil engineers 6 years to get the left cup and the right cup balanced, and that the alphabet ran out of letters to describe the size of her cups. When Dolly Parton turns rapidly, door lintels, door frames break in the next room. Dolly Parton once tried to go through an airport security detector. Her chest got there. Three people later, her ass went through the thing, and the guy didn't understand. He was still talking to the same woman. She's got mountains where Muhammad used to travel. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for listening to Law and Legitimacy. We'll be back tomorrow morning. We think.
Yes, we will. See you later. Bye.